Well, good morning.
Good morning.
You know, and Rika, thank you for the Every Little South song, because it's so powerful. You know, and it works so well with what we're doing this month. And I'll be honest, also the other side of it is, Gigi, thank you for announcing the class. Yes, I've done this class there before in an original form. We're taking it a step farther now with the new class because our language tells us really what we believe. And so as we pay attention to our language, we get to have a deeper understanding of some embedded beliefs, so that then we can work with them. And that also works perfectly with what we're doing this month around, the whole idea that we don't have to continue to tell those old stories to ourselves. Because those old stories are what keeps us in our dis-ease. And so we can move into that. So we're not limiting the stories that we've learned but through compassion and awareness and spiritual truth, we can renew our minds to choose a freer way of living. And so this focus this month, as we've talked about already a few times this morning, is healing from within. And it's that releasing of limiting beliefs. And so let's do that affirmation one more time. And I'll just say it, and if you guys want to, you can shut your eyes and just breathe it and affirm yourself. I release all limiting beliefs and embrace the healing power of divine love. I am whole, healed, and free to live the fullest expression of my truth. Oh, that's just, to me, that's powerful. Because many of us have stories about ourselves that we've repeated for years. And some are so familiar to us that we no longer even recognize them as stories. We assume that they're facts. We may say, I've never been good with money, or I'm too old to begin again, I just can't do it. Or I'm not a creative person, I don't have a creative bone in my body. Or, here's a big one that I hear a lot, I can't get up and speak in front of people. Or my family's always been this way. And as some of you know, it's always been this way is one of my pet peeves when I'm working with people because, so what? It was that way last year, but are you the same person you were last year? So let's just get over that for ourselves and move into the truth of who we are. Right?
Yeah.
So when a belief has been repeated long enough, we begin to organize our lives around it. And we avoid opportunities that might challenge it. And we notice evidence that supports it, and we disregard the evidence that contradicts it. And eventually, a thought we once accepted becomes a boundary that we're afraid to cross. So many times, so this is kind of the anatomy of how our beliefs will turn right around and actually limit who we are in this world. So, excuse me 1 second, because Pam is out mowing the front yard, and it is setting off the ring alarm, and it keeps talking over the corner. And it's distracting me. I know you guys probably can't hear it, but it's like, okay, so I know she's out there. So, I think I got, anyway. And so my belief was that it was bothering you guys. See, so I have to let go of that because it was bothering me. I had to own what it was actually doing with me. Some of the boundaries in our lives, they're not necessarily walls, but, what if they just are lines drawn in pencil? And we know that, on legal documents, you can't do it in pencil because you can erase it. So that means that if we draw some of those boundaries in pencil, we have the ability to erase them and redraw them and how it supports us and where we are today. Most limiting beliefs, they didn't begin because we consciously chose them. They often developed as attempts to understand or survive an experience. As we've done things around the 4 agreements in the past, we also understand that a lot of our beliefs are embedded in us through our parents, our school, our friends, through society, culture. But we're told that's the way it is. And humans, unfortunately, have a tendency to act more like sheep a lot of times and just go, okay, if you say so, I'll believe it. But the truth is we have the ability to discern. It's one of our 12 powers, that power of discernment. So this just reminds us that, a child who's frequently, criticized, they might decide that I'm not good enough. Or someone who experiences rejection may decide that it's not safe. It's safer for me not to be seen because if somebody sees me, they're going to criticize me. So they withdraw and move back into the background. Somebody who's lived through a loss, they might believe that, if I love deeply, I'm only going to get hurt. If I open myself up to friends or to love or to family and something happens, then we begin this belief of, oh, that's dangerous territory. I can't open my heart to this situation because if I do, I'm going to get hurt. Well, you may. And everything I've experienced is, my life is richer when I allow myself to be open, and even if I get hurt, it's worth the price that I paid for the experience I had getting to that point. These beliefs may once have felt like they were protecting us. And remaining unseen, that may have reduced criticism, and avoiding vulnerability, that might have reduced the risk. But a belief that helped us navigate one season can limit us in another. And so it's important that we look at it and go, okay, is this still true? And was it even true to begin with, or did it just feel like a safe place for me? And so, healing doesn't require us to shame ourselves for developing those old beliefs. No, it's what was. And we're not in the business of beating ourselves up. That's not what we're about. That's not the truth of who we are. We can recognize that our minds were trying to protect us, and we can understand, have that available from time to time, that maybe in a moment we need to kind of go into that and go, okay, what's going on here? And we can thank an old belief for the purpose it once served, and then we lovingly release it. We do this at the end and beginning of every year. We do the burning bowl, and that's part of it, is looking what is no longer serving us. And we're taking it a little deeper to allow belief to really focus on that idea of what thoughts and beliefs do we hold that really stops us from becoming more of who we're here to be. Unity teaches that our thoughts are creative. Our habitual patterns of thinking influence what we expect, and what we perceive and how we respond, and what we're willing to attempt. That all starts through the creative process that we are masters of. And you say, well, I don't know, I'm not too good at creating. I promise you, you're creating every moment of every day, whether it be through actively engaging or passively rejecting. You're still creating. And so this teaching, it's got to be held with wisdom and compassion. It's not an invitation to blame people or ourselves for an illness or a trauma or some kind of an injustice or a difficult circumstance. Through my years in Unity, I have seen metaphysical malpractice happen many, many times. Someone may have an illness, and early on in Unity, I heard this a lot, but I'm hoping that we've progressed as a movement and in our spiritual teachings to bring us beyond that. Somebody will have an issue or a physical challenge, and I've heard people say, well, if your lower back hurts, that's because you just believe that you're not being supportive and you've caused that backache. Well, we may not feel like we're being supported, but did we cause it? Not necessarily. It's important for us to recognize that we are creative, but it's not just a fleeting thought. Years ago I'd hear people, they'd say something, they'd go, oh, cancel, cancel, cancel. Well, you can do that. But I would always stand back and go, okay, when they're going cancel, 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 are they digging it deeper? Or is it just, it's a fleeting thought, go, okay, thank you, bye. Boom. And let it be gone. It's just important for us to remember that blame does not heal. And Unity's teaching about thoughts is an invitation to recognize our spiritual agency, our spiritual abilities, and to recognize that our thoughts are powerful, our thoughts are creative. And for us to pick that up and go, okay, I have the ability, as I choose, to create my experiences. Now, this has been a place in Unity for years where there's been some questions. Well, if I have a thought and I'm creating it, I just need to be able to go ham sandwich and let it appear. Well, I hope we all get there. That's the desire for us to get there to that point to where our creative abilities are so attuned and so in line that we can make manifest out of the ethers, out of nothing. We do it, but we don't do it to the extreme of ham sandwich and what appeared. But what we're doing so much of the time is recognizing that we have the ability to consciously be engaged in what we're creating in our life. That's what this is about. We may not have chosen everything that's happened to us, but with support and grace and spiritual practice, we can increasingly choose what meaning we give to it, how we perceive it, what our perceptions are, and how much power we give to what those perceptions are. And then how do we move forward? How do we move past that experience? Paul wrote that be transformed by the renewing of your minds. He didn't say be transformed by condemning your mind. He said renewing it. Renewing begins with an awareness and with love. And so as we are having a conscious awareness, hence why this class is in a perfect month that we're going to be doing about watching our language. Because with our language, we watch our thoughts. Okay? We notice, an old thought. We question it. We bring it into the light. And then we consciously introduce a greater spiritual truth. Is it true? Was it ever true? Okay, it may have been true at one point, but you know what? I'm not the same I was at that one point, and it's not, and I've grown beyond that, and I can release that belief or that idea and move into the new. Somebody might say I failed at something, and that may describe a particular event. But if that person says I'm a failure, an event has become the identity. Watch those I am statements. I made a mistake is different from I am a mistake. And a relationship ended is different from I am unloved. So be aware of how you're framing things. And you can even feel it in your body. Just in saying those things to you just then, I could feel the difference in my body about how it felt to go, okay, I've made a mistake. We all do it. Rather than saying, I made a mistake. Doesn't that feel heavy when you think about it like that? It feels heavy and like, oh, I don't like that at all. So just pay attention to the things that you're actually feeding your consciousness. Spiritual healing invites us to separate from what happened from who we are. Our experiences are real, and our feelings deserve to be honored. And no experience has the authority to define your divine identity. We continuously remain expressions of God. We are worthy, we are capable, we are creative, and we are filled with spiritual potential. Through the Gospels, Jesus met people whose society had defined by their circumstances. They were called blind or unclean or sinful or poor or possessed or outcast. And Jesus looked beyond the label and he recognized them. He saw the divinity in them. He saw them as a spiritual being. And he didn't deny their present experience. He saw something greater within them. And it's important for us to model that. He showed it. That's why we call him the way shower. He showed us how to be. Right now in the world, the way it is, we need to lean into this more than we ever have. We're being called to live into the truth and see beyond the outpicturings and see what's going on within. And the ultimate within, it may be guarded and there may be all kinds of stuff that's blocking and showing up in that person's life. But we know one of our primary teachings is that we are all divine in nature. Everyone, no exceptions. And so healing begins when we learn to see ourselves and others as Jesus saw. It's not a collection of failures or wounds or limitations, but it's as sacred beginnings in being this divine possibility and that we are alive in that divine potential. So when Jesus asked people, do you want to be made well? He wasn't blaming them for their condition. He was inviting them to participate in their healing. Healing included a willingness to see, a willingness to choose and rise and move in a new direction. And so let me just share a little secret with you. If you keep doing what you've always done and keep believing what you always believed, you stay where you are. You never go any further. And so we have a choice to see what is, see what has been, and hold the vision of what we desire, and to move. And so today I invite you to consider just one limiting belief. We don't start with every belief that you've ever had, because my word, that would be overwhelming. I couldn't even imagine. I probably wouldn't even get out of bed in the morning if I was trying to think of every belief that I've ever had that was, limiting. But just look at one, and then complete this sentence silently to yourself. Take just a moment, and think of one limiting belief, and then complete this sentence silently for yourself. I would live more freely if I no longer believed ... Okay. What comes to mind? Perhaps it was I'm not worthy, or I have to please everyone, or man, I missed my biggest opportunity. Or here's a big one. I have to be perfect to be accepted. Are any of those true? No. So now ask this of that belief that you brought to mind. Where did I learn this? Where did it come from? And is it absolutely true? And really, if this could feel a little sad, what has this belief cost me in my life? What spiritual truth is greater than this belief? And suppose that old belief is, I'm not enough. And the spiritual truth may be, I am an individualized expression of God, endowed with everything I need in my own. That old belief I cannot change into a new one, which divine life is renewing me, and I am always capable of growth. Maybe there was an old belief that my best years are behind me. The new truth might be God's possibilities are present in every season of my life. I have another community that I work with, and it's a very small, tiny community, and I've worked with them for years and years. It's basically so they have a ministerial presence in their lives. And they're down to 4 individuals. And they meet in the home of one of their congregants. But the oldest one there is getting ready to have her 103rd birthday next month. Okay? And I'll be meeting with them this afternoon. And the thing is this right here, she and I have this conversation all the time. It doesn't matter how old you are, if you're living the fullness of who you're here to be. And so that God's possibilities are present in every season of my life. I don't care how old we are. As long as we have breath, we are still living in that unlimited potential, in the full possibilities. So it's important for us to just have an awareness of, okay, well, that limiting belief is messing me up. And I'm going to be very honest with you right now. So back in May, I celebrated my 70th birthday. Okay? And yeah, and so what I'm going to tell you though is this. It seems like, and I got caught, so I get caught up in these circles of humanness just like everybody else. I got caught up in the, 70, that's big, that's a real milestone, right? And since then, what I will tell you is I have had every kind of unknown and known malady come along and feel like my body's just breaking down. Okay? I do weird things. I go in a couple of weeks because I'm going to have shoulder replacement. I've been dealing with some stuff with my blood sugars that shouldn't be going on. And it's like, okay, Beck, look what you're doing. Stop it. On one side, I will say the females in my family live well into their 90s. So that means I've got another 20 plus years if I follow that. And if I'm in right consciousness, I should be saying, I have female family members who lived well into their 90s and they didn't have the beautiful knowledge that we do about how we are so creative in our experience. So I'm called to share. I'm called to demonstrate doing that pivot from getting caught up in limiting beliefs and being, like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? To, hey, I'm going to live my best life right now and move into that place of knowing. It doesn't matter what images come up. It doesn't matter what, illusions are appearing. I can move beyond that and be true to myself. So many times there's an old story, and it just reminds me so much, and how we get caught up in our habit of being a certain way, And so there's an old familiar illustration that tells the story of a young elephant that was restrained by a rope attached to a stake. It was around his front leg. And while small, the elephant, he couldn't pull free because it stopped him from trying. And eventually he quit trying. And then when he became fully grown and powerful, that same small rope was just enough to keep him in place. Not because the rope was stronger than the elephant, not because the stake was driven so far into the ground that it couldn't be pulled up, because the elephant still believed that freedom was impossible. And don't we do that sometimes? Don't we get caught up in believing in our limitations? Don't we succumb to what mental pictures we draw for ourselves? Many of us have many spiritual and emotional ropes like that one. We remain constrained by the conclusions that we formed. And maybe we have few resources to really understand them. Maybe we had a mindset that came early in our unity experience, where we were less understanding and we didn't recognize the power that we held. So, the question is not whether we should blame ourselves for believing that rope, that spiritual rope, was strong. But the question is, am I willing to test it now? What step would you take if you believe divine wisdom would guide you in challenging that rope that is restraining you from becoming truly who you are? What conversations would you have if you believed that your voice mattered? What dream would you revisit if you believed that it wasn't too late? What boundary would you reestablish if you believed your well-being was sacred? Probably several pieces. The old thought, and we say, I recognize you, but I no longer give you authority. When we have that old thought, if we will just address it like that, oh, yeah, I'm familiar with you. That you're a thought that I've carried with me off and on through my whole life. And at some point in time, you were a benefit to me. But right now, I just need to thank you and bless you for what you did, but let you know that you have no right, no authority to be in charge of who I am. And we return to the truth. We return to, to the possibility of imagine that we create a new path, a new field, and that the old one is there. I love when I'm out walking to take new ways, even when I'm out driving, to go a new way to see what's there. Maybe, what do I miss? There might be something amazing down this path that I just never even had an idea was there. But when we take our chance, when we say, okay, that path got me there, but I'm ready to see what else is available. And how do we do this? Permanent prayer, meditation, journaling, spiritual counseling, the community, right there where you are, supporting each other. Honest conversations with ourselves can help us establish that new inner pathway. And so this week, I want to share something I want to invite you to do before we go into a time of meditation. I invite you to recognize, notice any limiting thought that may come through without committing it. This is an old belief, and it's not your divine identity. Well, recognize that and speak that. This is an old belief, and it's not my divine truth. It's not my divine identity. And then when we recognize it, then we release it. We take a deep breath, and we say, I release the need to carry this belief into my future that no longer serves me. And I let it go. And then we know, as we talk about affirmations and denials, when we deny something, because that's basically what we just did, we recognized that we denied it, and now we're going to fill it with something of desire. And so we choose a spiritual truth. And divine love supports me, wisdom guides me, and new possibilities are opening with every breath and every thought. Amen. So that's just a possibility for us. When we recognize that we live in a field of unlimited possibilities and potential, and all we have to do is shift our thoughts, focus, to be fully immersed in that and be just having the greatest time with our creative juices. We are powerful. And so I release all limiting beliefs and embrace the healing power of divine love. I am whole, healed, and free to live as the fullest expression of my truth. Oh, yeah, that is the truth of who I am, who you are, and who the whole planet is. And so I would love to take us into a time of meditation. So if you will, begin to assume your meditative positioning, how you feel, and I'm going to go ahead and share. Just let us become still. And if it's comfortable, close your eyes or soften your gaze. And just take a slow, gentle breath in and release it. And again, just breathe in peace. Breathe out tension. Allow your body to settle into the support beneath you. And as you do, relax your shoulders. Soften the muscle around your eyes and your jaw. And just let your hands rest. And bring your attention to that quiet center within you. The sacred place where divine love is always present. And silently affirm to yourself, divine love is here. Divine love is within me. Divine love surrounds and supports me. Imagine a warm, gentle light glowing within your heart. It's not a light that you must create. It's a light of your divine nature. It's that divine presence that's always lived within you. With tenderness and genteel, become aware of one belief you're ready to release. And gently, just have that awareness. There's no need to force anything. Just simply allow a word or a phrase or a feeling to arise. Perhaps it's a belief that you're not enough. And perhaps it's a belief that you have to stay small and hidden in this world. Perhaps it's a belief that your past determines your future. Observe the belief without judgment. And just share some love with it. And gently say, I see this old belief. I honor the way I once tried to protect myself. And I no longer need this story to define me. Imagine placing the belief in that divine light of love. And see that light just surrounding that belief. Not fighting with it, but gently transforming it. Gently opening it and transforming it. And as you breathe out, affirm, I release. And as you breathe in, affirm, I receive divine truth. I release the belief that I am unworthy, and I receive the truth that I am a beloved expression of God. I release the belief that I am powerless, and I receive the divine strength that lives within me. I release the belief that it's too late, and I receive the truth that new possibilities are present right now. And as we enter into a time of silence, in the silence, allow divine love to reveal the truth your soul is ready to receive. Allow yourself to have an awareness of the truth of who you are. As we go into the silence, into the silence. If you would, just gently return your attention to your breath. Feel the light within your heart expanding throughout your body. Feel that light filling every thought and every cell with peace. Then silently affirm, my mind is renewed. My heart is open. My past is released. Divine love is healing me now. And together, we do hold that affirmation. I release all limiting beliefs and embrace the healing power of divine love. I am whole, healed, and free to live as the fullest fullest expression of my true self. So if you would, take one more deep breath. And when you're ready, gently open your eyes and carry this truth into your day, into your week, into your month, and into your full